Andrea Nicholls, thanks so much for being here. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And thanks for asking me. I'm really happy to be here with you today, this morning.
I appreciate that. Are you in Toronto? Toronto, you're in Montreal.
I'm in Montreal. That's right.
Yes.
I'm in Montreal. A lot of people do think that I'm in Toronto since I spend so much time there, but I'm indeed in Montreal, a born and bred Montrealer, and proud of it.
Wonderful. I'm also proud to be born in Montreal.
Yeah.
But the story kind of ends there because I moved here as a baby and drove across the 401. But all my life I would visit my grandmother there.
That's right. Go back and forth.
She lived at Decarie and Vizina near that big orange julep.
Definitely,
sure
you know where that is. Yes, that's it. That's a landmark here in Montreal.
Yeah. So is Dentons Canada, where you're CFO, there's obviously a Toronto office, there's a Montreal office.
That's right.
And across Canada and then globally. How does that all kind of work in terms of how you spend your time? You said a lot of time in Toronto. Is the executive team largely in Toronto?
It really varies. We've got 6 offices throughout Canada. So if I go from east to west, we've got Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, Calgary, Edmonton, and Vancouver. Our team is actually spread out. We really work well virtually. Our CEO, Tim Haney, he resides in Calgary. But we all do quite a bit of traveling. And really, we're Dentons Canada. So our Canadian partnership, again, are those 6 offices. We are part of a global firm, Dentons Global. We operate in a number of regions throughout the world, the largest ones being Canada, the US, the UK IME, and Europe. Those are the largest, but we also operate in Africa, LAC, or Latin America and Caribbean, India, really branching out throughout the world. So it makes it for a really, really interesting way to do business, a way to be able to serve our clients on a cross-border point of view. And again, we also work with each other in the different finance teams. We work cross-border as well. So it's really an interesting place to be.
Yeah, and we talked about this even before getting started here. It's just always been, to me, interesting to try to understand different types of complexities that you encounter. Like professional services is certainly its own thing. And then a legal firm, and then being a global legal firm. And so all of the kind of dynamics around that. But you don't come from that space originally. You spent time in other industries.
That's right.
I guess it would be great to hear your story, your evolution into getting into this world. And then we can double click on some of the unique, things you see in this space. So how did you get into this?
Sure. And thanks for that. I actually started my career at PricewaterhouseCoopers here in Montreal. I spent 13 years there in audit of usually large public companies. So I did a lot of large public companies. I also did a lot of tech companies as well, which drove me to do my US CPA. So I'm a Canadian CPA as well as a US. And then I did different roles throughout Montreal in the controllership, VP finance area. So I went into different industries, as you alluded to. I worked for GE Capital on the capital side. I worked for a subsidiary of Caisse de Dépôt as well. I worked as well in right before I came to Dentons, I was at a tech company, a mid-stage tech company called Triton Digital. And we had a couple of going to the market. So that was really different. I think that, and you noted that, I think everything at my career at PwC as an auditor prepared me for my trajectory of career. As an auditor, you learn to go into businesses, learn about them very quickly in order to identify the risks and be able to audit them. I think that's something that I really love and prepared me to be in different industries. I think that at the end of the day, as you allude to, the professional service industry is very, very different, but the fundamentals of finance remain the same. The fundamentals remain capital allocation, strategic planning, ensuring that you've got a strong finance team, ensuring that the books are clean and that you really understand the risk factors. That doesn't change from industry to industry in terms of those fundamentals. What does change is the understanding of the business. So when you go into a new industry, it's really key that you understand, first of all, what are the levers or the key performance indicators of that business? What are the drivers? What is important? What are the risks? What is the company culture like? And once you understand that, you can become an effective CFO, regardless of the industry. But you have to have an open mind to be able to learn. You have to be the kind of person, in my mind, if you want to change industry, you have to be okay walking into an organization and saying, I don't know anything, I'm going to learn. Listening with two ears, one mouth, and really trying to understand what are the drivers before you start making any decisions, any changes, and such. You have to be okay with that. And it takes time to ramp up. You need to do your homework. You need to understand who to talk to, who are the right people who can help you understand the industry, whether or not it's internal or external. It will be internal and external. So at the end of the day, it's really about trying to understand. But those fundamentals of finance, really understanding capital allocation, cash flow, liquidity, high level accounting items, how to manage a finance team and build a strong finance team who can support and look forward instead of not only backward, who can use information and trends to move forward. That's really your job as a CFO. So,
do you think a CFO, as there's a time where industry experience, I think, is super valuable, and then a time where even outside industry might be even more valuable. How do you kind of see that? I think we tend to over index on industry experience because it's more comforting to know that someone knows all the acronyms coming in.
That's right.
But I wonder how much that is missing out on outside ideas and thinking and better ways of doing things.
I guess I may be a little bit biased on that note, because I think that while industry experience is extremely important, I think you may miss out on talent or finance talent if you don't look broadly. I think the difference is when you do find somebody who doesn't necessarily have that industry experience, it needs to be a person who is not afraid to learn and is open to learning and really doing the homework and taking the time. It also depends on what exactly the organization is going through. The organization may be building, or it may be going through an exit transaction whereby maybe your current CFO left for whatever reason. You're in the midst of an exit transaction, and it makes sense to bring somebody in who understands the industry because it's really fast, quick, and fast moving, as opposed to something that's being built. So I think you have to really focus on understanding where your organization is in the evolution, but don't lose out on folks that don't necessarily have 100% industry expertise, as long as they have positioned themselves and shown themselves to be open to learning. And that means continuous education, that means formal, informal, really it's really a personality thing, and something that you can discern through just talking to people. You can tell whether or not people are open to continuing to learn, or and when I'm recruiting, I just say, listen, if you want to come into an organization, or I've recruited in the past, some people like to come into an organization where everything is being done the same way as it's been done in the past, and there's a set process and format for everything. Doesn't mean every organization is there in its evolution, right? So you really have to be cognizant of that.
So you mentioned 13 years in audit. That's a long time. That's not like me, where I say I just did my time and got out.
Yes.
Maybe one of the few things I liked about audit was understanding of businesses and new companies and industries and the learning. And then I started to lose interest when we got into some of the other aspects of audit. But did you think of yourself as staying or see yourself staying within, that firm environment your whole career, and sort of what made you think otherwise?
Yes, I mean, I did. And it's funny, I'll touch on a couple of comments that you made. I personally feel that the sweet spot in audit is staying at least until you're a manager where you see the entire file. I think that people leave after, let's say, 2 years, because it's true. I mean, you're doing a cash section or accounts payable section. You're doing one aspect, which is not as interesting. But when you get to see the whole file and when everything comes together, it's a lot more interesting. I had a dilemma. I love what I was doing. I love the aspect of learning about new organizations and just having that, consulting, sharing my expertise. But in terms of the partnership at a big four, that piece did not necessarily interest me personally. So I stayed on. I was able to stay on as a senior manager doing large clients for quite a bit and then tech clients. So it served my purpose then. But after a certain amount of time, even though we know that there are different career paths at the big four, especially at the time way back when, the ultimate goal is always partnership. And that wasn't something necessarily I wanted to do. So maybe I did stay a little bit too long. Hindsight is 2020, but I still look back at my time there with fondness, and I use tools every single day that I gained by working at PwC. In terms of technical skills, in terms of managing people, I think the big part of being at a big four firm is you start to manage people fairly early in your career. So by the time you're year 3, when you become a senior on the file, you start managing people and managing the workflow. That is pretty early in your career to start managing people, especially when we're pretty young, that right out of school. So I think that foundation has helped me up until today, with 30 plus years of experience. Just that basic learning how to manage people, learning how to manage time, learning how to report up and both ways. I think what audit teaches you is your file always has to be reviewed for something by somebody else, and it's driven into you to create as clear a file as possible. So when the person who's reviewing it can ask you the least questions, right? We want to have the least review notes. And that teaches you actually to create communication that's really, really clear, easy to understand, easy to follow, well thought out. And those skills, again, I use every single day of my career, whether or not it's crafting an email to our team internally, whether or not it's speaking to my boss, whether or not it's reporting out to the board, to the audit committee, to our management committee. And you use those skills every day, the ability to communicate clearly and hone in on the risks. What are the risky items that people need to know and understand?
I feel like we should take that as a short snippet for Big Four recruitment, and you're gonna help those folks work. I know they're struggling a little bit on the recruitment side.
I know. I
Firms.
mean, I feel really, really strongly about that training ground, and I don't at all think that people recognize how powerful it is. It's especially powerful for folks like myself, who don't necessarily come from a business background. I'm a first generation Canadian. My parents were from the Caribbean. My dad was an economics professor, so more on the academia side, not necessarily the business side. And I think a Big Four is a great way to introduce yourself to the business world, how to network, how to speak to people. It's a training ground. And I think that is so powerful and useful that I don't think that people are really recognizing at this time. I know, and I read a lot of articles about it's tough, right? Because the hours are long. When you compare to other disciplines, the starting salaries aren't as high, and people, I understand the younger folks of this generation want to make sure that they are rewarded for the work they put in. So there's a challenge in recruiting folks. But I really think that as you said before, some of us more seasoned folks need to get on the road and really explain to folks coming up about the benefits and how much that can help their career. And it doesn't mean, I mean, look at yourself. It doesn't matter. You've stayed a couple of years and look at where you are now as well. There are different ways of doing things. There's a lot of flexibility in this career.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I find myself even reflecting on, over the years, I would joke about the audit. I've been running away ever since, and that's partially true in my career. I gravitated from audit to the strategic finance, the FP&A side, and the business side and strategy, and moved from large corps to earlier stage where, with a good controller, I was barely really, looking at accounting.
Yeah.
So we all have our journey, but as I, reflect on a lot of the things you touched on, there's so many things you learn. And so, the people you meet in the network, which carries through your entire career, and the caliber of folks, that's sort of unparalleled. And then I think you're getting into things like from the audit file. I totally agree. Concepts like, and I learned the hard way, saying I did something because it was the way it was done last year.
That's it, exactly.
Classic, and it comes up
That's
time and time again in our career. Yeah, question the status quo. So I hear you on staying long enough where you hone your own leadership style, but even in the first couple of years being junior and having different managers, you learn a lot.
You learn a lot. You learn a lot, even in after a couple of years. And I think that is we don't sell it enough as a career where there's so many different, it's a springboard off of being able to do so many different things, so many different paths, right? And I think we need to do a better job.
And even authentic leadership, because there were some real mean.
Oh yeah.
I was going to use a different word. I don't know if I want to open up cursing on my podcast.
You really learned that, right?
But then I would see
people. Yeah.
I would see people sort of moving into the manager role and sort of emulate those mean partners.
Yeah.
And I always thought it wasn't, if it wasn't authentic, it doesn't work. And I never would buy into it. But that mean partner, that's who they were. And you're kind of like, okay, that's how you're consistent and that's who you are.
That's right.
And you can sort of embrace aspects of that. But if it wasn't authentic, it didn't work. So that was a huge learning. And the other thing I want to mention, that today I'll meet younger people in their careers. And now with the change in CA or CPAs that haven't gone through the audit stream, I start finding myself finding more favor in that audit background, because there's sort of a foundation that someone has. And it doesn't mean you can't get it in all these other streams, but it's not as much a certainty.
Exactly. I personally feel that way. I know I may be, mixed for that. I really think you can get it elsewhere, but I think the audit route it's so foundational and it's so organic, and you just learn those skills in a more structured fashion. I think that it's easier for you to come out of this from the audit side. And of course, we understand why it had to be changed. We understand completely. And at the end of the day, but you can tell the difference in terms of structure and how things come to you, whether or not people have gone through the audit path, in my mind, or elsewhere. None is better than the other. It's just different.
On that note, I'm curious to know your experience with hiring, because it's very difficult. It's probably always been a challenging thing to do, but the market in finance and finance roles and what we just talked about in terms of various backgrounds. What's your experience as a CFO hiring teams and talent, and things that you find you gravitate to, or what are some of the challenges and how do you overcome them?
Sure. And I think that it's really important. Hiring is the key because having a strong finance team trumps everything. That's your role in the C-suite, right? To ensure that you've got the right team. So I spend a lot of time on that aspect. For instance, at Dentons, we're over 100 people in our finance group throughout Canada. So it's a pretty big team. We want to make sure we've got the right people with the right skills at the right places. And it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge. It's easy to find people, but to find people who are really committed it is a challenge. And the market is tough. There's a lot of competition. At the end of the day, I use a number of particular headhunters that I really come up with quality folks. I think that finding a headhunter that you really trust and you really have a relationship and knows you and knows your team over time, I think that's helpful. Also, I think your personal network is key as well. After being around for this amount of time and working in different organizations, your network becomes broader and broader. So to be able to reach out to your network and, with a particular skill set that you're looking for, I think that's really helpful as well. But that takes as well cultivating your network and making sure that you're keeping in contact and ties. But at the end of the day, it continues to be a challenge. I don't think that's isolated to the finance market. I think it's a challenge in the IT field. I think it's a challenge in the talent field. At any time, at the end of the day, you're looking for specific skills and a specific mindset. Also, individuals who will mesh well with the organization's culture. It's going to be a challenge. And you just need to take the time. I think that at the end of the day, you can't rush finding good talent. There may be a lead time of months before you identify a great candidate and you really understand, and it's a two-way street. They have to want you as much as you want them, and sometimes that takes a lot of time.
Yeah, I love that that last line. I would spend enough time educating or bringing folks up to speed on what they'd be walking into, and no sort of window dressing or misleading, because I've seen folks walk into a role on day one and that deer in headlights, and it's not going to work.
You just know it's not going to work.
What do you mean I need to do that by myself?
Exactly. You've mischaracterized the role, right? And sometimes it is intentional, sometimes it's not intentional. But at the end of the day, you need to really make sure you have been crystal clear about what the role entails, what they're walking into. And or else at the back end, to your point, David, it doesn't matter when the person leaves after a week or you've invested all that time for nothing. Every time you invest in a new talent, it's investment time for the whole organization. So have to be, as they say, measure twice, cut once, right?
Yes, I like that. My own experience when I was leaving the firm, like one of my early interviews, I guess I could share it now because I was young, inexperienced, but I walked into an interview that probably wasn't the most suitable role for me, and it was with Onyx, but the role was like so technical, and it was like calculating gains and losses on discontinued operations was the entire like job. And I was just trying to kind of get out there, and first time I was really interviewing and talking about myself and trying to figure out what I wanted to do, again running away from audit and what's next. And I kind of embellished the extent to which I liked technical accounting. I said, yes, I love this.
Of the moment. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, in the spirit of the moment. And then maybe a little bit of ego and wanting to get a job offer to give me confidence as I embarked on, further job exploration. And, I got the job offer, and it just reminded me, or I'm reminded when I think back to that story, that, it's very hard in an interview to really ensure you're getting the right person. So like those data points on, someone else that's worked with them and says, this is someone that you're going to really, value having on your team. Like
That's
that
right.
just, it goes so
It
far.
goes so far.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the things that I've observed in my career in interviewing is there are some people who are fantastic interviewees, sorry. Fantastic. But when they get there, not so much. There's the opposite, where there are some people who are not great in an interview. They're just not, a little bit nervous, just not great in an interview. But if you take a chance, they're phenomenal on the job. And
Right.
I think that's something at the beginning probably of my career, I probably would have been very starstruck at a great interviewee. But I think I've learned, you need to dig a little deeper, because it doesn't necessarily mean that because somebody's quiet or shy that they're not going to perform well in the role and be very happy in the role. But it takes some time. It takes some probing, according, and
Yes.
depending on the role, right? Each role is different.
To your point earlier, like it's about them, and it's like what is their motivation? Because they may be great for the same job description. A lot of them read the same, especially like the finance job description for a controller. But in one environment, they may thrive, in another, they won't. And so you really need to number one, be clear with them in what environment they're walking into, and then understand how that links up to their motivation. Because if it doesn't serve them, it's not going to serve
If
the
it
business. So
doesn't, that's it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, back to what we started the discussion on, folks are not staying in jobs, for an inordinate amount of time. People are moving 2-3 years when they feel they've gotten what they need out of the role and they have a better role. And understandably so, I think it's a different world these days. So you've got to be able to fulfill what they're looking for. And you want people who are motivated. And most of all, you want to be happy. Nobody wants to be doing a role where, as they say, the Sunday scaries where, it's Monday morning. We all have parts of our jobs that are not the most exciting, but on the whole, you've got to be happy to come into the office or open your laptop on Monday morning. You need to be happy, or else it shows.
Andrew, speaking of parts of our jobs, in the CFO role, and you talked about talent and team, and with 100 folks in the finance team, that's I'm sure a lot of your focus. But talk a bit more about your role as CFO, and then what are some of the unique aspects within a law firm that you have been focused on?
Sure, I think uniquely at a law firm, I think the biggest difference is that you are dealing, it's in my mind, it's ownership. You are dealing with hundreds of owners of the organization as a partnership. It's not one major shareholder or a bunch of shareholders on the market. And where the strategy is, you set the strategy, you go in a corporate environment, everybody's moving to the same direction. In a law firm, you've got a bunch of basically entrepreneurs. Each partner owns his, her, their business, has a certain view of his, her, their business. There's a lot of consensus building in as a CFO of a law firm that is not necessarily present in a corporate environment where everybody's moving to the same strategy. A lot of that makes it very interesting and really improves your skills at consensus building accordingly. But it is different than a corporate environment. I would say to anybody who's looking to go into leadership at a law firm, you really have to ensure that you're a person who can listen to different opinions, listen to and be able to shake all the opinions and come out with suggestions that make sense for the business. You're never going, it's not a command control environment, it's really a consensus building environment. And, the drivers are, again, it's learning the drivers and the risks for the business. They're different. But it's really just being able to listen and understand that there are a lot of competing priorities.
And I can only imagine that your stakeholders would not be shy on opinions.
Not at all. They are not at all shy on
Right.
opinions. As a CFO, I receive calls that sometimes like, you calling the CFO about that? Wow, okay, but no problem. But you realize at the end of the day, your role is to support the stakeholders. It doesn't change from that point of view, ensuring profitability, strategy, growth moving forward. So those aspects don't change, and ensuring that you've got a strong team to support the business. So those fundamentals don't change, but the way everybody interacts is definitely different in a professional services firm.
Right. Right. So you talked about ownership structure as one element, and then a lot of the other aspects that would be common amongst any business.
Yeah,
But also there's unique elements within professional services.
that's right.
Can you talk about that side of things? Because we come across professional services firms at various stages. A lot of them earlier stage have seen a lot of growth and are kind of trying to catch up, in terms of professionalizing within the finance function. What are some of the things you've seen, or, how does that journey look for, Dentons, or just even speaking more generally to that within a professional services environment? Obviously, technology is a huge enabler, but maybe you could speak just a little bit to that journey.
Yes, I will. On the journey in terms of the pieces, as you may know, Dentons came together through a combination of different firms. So definitely we are relatively young in our structure. When we're structured, we're basically very much structured as a big four, from a global presence. So obviously we're the Canadian partnership. So as one of the big drivers has been to shore up our technological and professional expertise. And that's one of the reasons why I was recruited by Beth Wilson, who was a former managing partner of the Toronto office at KPMG. So she came on as CEO of Dentons back in 2017. I was recruited in 2019. So part of that push was to really professionalize the structure, the management structure, the reporting, what we did, the systems we used, the way we managed the business. And we continue to do that accordingly. I think that.
By the way, Beth, if you recall, introduced you and
That's
I,
right. Beth
and
introduced.
was a partner at the office where I started at KPMG.
Exactly. Beth is
phenomenal. Yeah.
An amazing force, and I'm lucky to count her as a mentor to this day. At the end of the day, bringing in that level of expertise is key, and that professionalism. So we continue, like, for instance, right now we're in the process of a finance transformation over at Dentons. We're moving to a new updated version of our finance software, which is going to really allow us to use technology, improve our reporting, automate a lot of our functions, move away from a lot of manual functions, will help us to better serve our clients, internal and external, easier reporting, easier dashboards for our partners, and easier reporting for our clients. So we're moving towards really improving those pieces. I think that's what makes it interesting in a professional services firm. So you've got the professional nature as well as really building that structure to be able to analyze numbers, to be able to identify trends, and really view finance as a value added. We want to act as a partner for our partners. We want to act as strategic partners to help them make better business decisions. We have all the information, but to put it in a format that's helpful, and put it in a format whereby we really discern what are key information that can help to build the business. So that's what we're really doing from a finance point of view. That's what makes it so interesting for me every day as we continue to look at the data, especially when we are in a financial and geopolitical environment that we are today. Tariffs on, tariffs off, tariffs on, tariffs off. What does that mean for the business? What does that mean for our clients? We're happy to be participating here. And also being, I think, the number one thing that teaches us, especially after the pandemic, is the comfort with uncertainty. As a CFO, you just need to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, and because you never know what's going to be thrown at you, and be able to rock and roll with that. And again, also support your team in that.
Oh man, there's a lot there. No, because on that last point, I'm thinking like we all know, sort of risk management, from a governance perspective. And the pandemic's a great example. Tariffs are another one. Most of them we don't see coming, and we're never going to know exactly what's around the corner. But how do you get away from being reactive, given that reality that we're not going to know when and what? How do you then become proactive in that regard?
In that room, I think it's being a couple of things. Number one, you need to read. You need to spend the time really getting out of the bubble of your immediate business, reading business press, reading economics, reading about other industries, reading about other global areas. You really have to open your mind to be able to understand what's happening, and also spend the time to think about what's your plan B, what is your contingency plan, and that means, it's very easy to get caught up with the day to day. I think you'd really need to put aside some time to really think about, what does this mean for your business? What does this mean for your team? What does this mean for the stakeholders? What does this mean for the industry? What does it mean for your geography? That's another great bit of advice that I got from Beth Wilson. Make sure you're intentional to set aside that time and really think about it. And I know we're all busy, but you really need to set aside that time to really read, think about things, and it really is amazing how much you can come up with if you really set aside. And also talking to other people within your network. We have a CFO roundtable for law firms where we get together on a regular basis and exchange information. Of course, all within the confines of the confidentiality rules. But at the end of the day, and the privacy rules, but we share information. I share information with my informal network, other CFOs in other industries, where we talk about things on a regular basis. So, all of those tools are available to you and are not necessarily in a textbook. They didn't teach us that in school, David, or they didn't teach us that, necessarily at a Big Four, but those are the things you need to do in order to succeed. And spending the time outside of the office is so important for us, making that time.
I know I'm jumping around here, but you keep on bringing up topics that I think are worth exploring. So we talked about network. You talked about even the beyond the roundtable, the informal. I was curious to know if there are any sort of formal groups outside of that roundtable that you've been involved with. And then maybe a little bit about the mentorship. You've mentioned Beth Wilson a few times, and not everybody gets about Beth Wilson
Not
in their
everybody
world.
do.
So talk a little bit about your experience with those, and then mentorship in particular.
Sure. I think a lot of what I've been drawn to in terms of my networking is being a Black woman in corporate Canada. There are not many of us, right? So it's been really important for me to network with people who look like myself. Done a lot of work with CFOs, which is business organization out of Toronto, which focuses on the Black community, a lot of different Black community groups as well. So it's important that you network with folks like yourself. Also, on the whole, with my board work, I'm a member of Women Get on Board, which we spend a lot of time networking with a lot of women in the board space. There's the Financial Executives Institute as well. They have organizations or they have activities that you get to network. And of course, I did follow recently the Institute of Corporate Directors, the ICD course, also the Competent Board course. So met a lot of people throughout those courses that we still keep in contact. I still keep in contact with. So it's really important to widen your network. I still keep in contact with people from my time at PwC. So really keeping in contact and whether or not it's a lunch or whether or not it's an activity as well. Mentorship is very important to me. I get a lot of reach outs from young Black professionals in the finance world who are building their careers. And I think actually the mentorship, I think, gives me probably more than it gives them. The opportunity to give back, the opportunity, because when I came up in my career, none of that was in place. So the opportunity for me to be able to share what it's like to be in the room, for what it's like to be in the C-suite, what it's like to be in the boardroom, I think is really, really important for me. I think that the young individuals are hungry for knowledge. They reach out all the time, and I always have time for them because at the end of the day, if, as I was taught, if you don't keep the door open for someone behind you, then there's no point. Right? If you're just sitting, you may have achieved a certain level, but if you don't help people up, then there's no point. So for me, giving back is key.
Do you ask? You mentioned people asking you for your time.
Yes.
But do you get to a place where like, hey, do you want to be my mentor, or would you be my mentor, or is it more organic and fluid?
I do ask, maybe not as directly as do you want to be my mentor, but more like, do you have time to talk about a couple of key concepts? Would you have time to have a coffee chat? Now with the virtual world, things are so much easier to do that type of thing because you don't need to, get in your car or to meet at a specific point. You can do this. So in my experience, I've found that people are more than happy to spare a half an hour of their time talking about a particular issue that they can impart a lot of knowledge on. And for me, that's been a game changer. I don't think at the beginning of my career, I appreciated how important networking was. It's not a meritocracy where you can be, expert at your field only. You really have to utilize the people around you to share knowledge. So that's something that I stress when I talk to younger people. Really take the time to develop your network, whether or not it's a nonprofit board that doesn't have anything to do with finance, but just being able to network, hone your skills in talking to people and being able to spot issues, being able to communicate, those things are key.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I always find myself wondering, how to better inform younger folks in their careers on, not just the importance of this, because they may just intuitively understand that, but the how-to a little bit.
Yes.
And so much I learned along the way. And if I look back, could have done it a whole lot better, a whole lot earlier, a whole lot more consistently.
For sure. For sure.
But the power, I think, is under recognized and the educational stage. Maybe that and communication.
Definitely. Together, I think those two are, I would have said from my point of view, when I was younger, it was all about, making sure that you're technically strong, making sure you know your material as an accountant, making sure you know your accounting rules and you work hard and you work the late hours, and that's all great. And but those are table stakes. Quite honestly, the key difference is the networking piece and just being able to identify what you don't know and what you need to work on and what someone can help you work on and what you need to self-study and improve. I think that is that's golden. And if I think that's one of the things that I wish I had learned earlier in my career. But as you said before, we get certain knocks here and there, and you learn from your mistakes. I think from as well, one of the things you learn is I think we touched on this at the beginning, which I think the younger people are better at. When something doesn't serve you, move on. If you don't have sponsors and mentors and people supporting you in a role, most importantly, sponsoring you, then move on. And being able to do that and be honest with yourself in terms of what is it, a weakness or something that you need to improve, or is it basically somebody who does not you're working for somebody, for instance, who does not believe in you and does not want to see you succeed. You have to be able to spot that and move along accordingly.
Totally agreed. And then even if you find, those people that do support you, those advocates, those supporters, truth tellers to tell you,
Truth tellers,
things
I
about
love
yourself
that. Yeah,
that you don't recognize.
that's right.
Even if you leave the organizations where you may meet those folks, it doesn't mean you can't stay connected.
Doesn't mean you can't stay connected. I love that.
Yeah.
For sure. And you keep those connections forever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And then there's certain nuggets people kind of give you over your career, and you'll never forget those.
Never
and
forget
they serve
them.
you, and so I love that. And there's so much there. We could probably spend another episode diving into that. But just maybe to come back to something I know that's a big focus of your career, and you spoke to it a little bit about DEI, and I think that term now has taken on a whole new kind of. I mean, there's sort of the political side of things. There's probably some true challenges with sort of outcomes and efficacy and how things work in practice, and where the intent is right, but maybe the outcomes don't always end up where we want them to be, and how much of that is just noise. At the end of the day, you're trying to accomplish things that are really good for people and for business, but the challenges of headlines and things that take us off course can get in the way. So maybe what's the state of that, and what are the things that you continue to stay focused on, sort of that North Star, and how are you spending your time in that world?
Yes,
there's a lot to that question, but
I think that's the hot question, David, and I think for folks like myself who are very committed to DEI, what is going on right now is devastating, unfair, and untrue, because it's based on untruth. The key part that is being disseminated is as if DEI means non-merit. So making the playing field a little bit more fair to allow people who do have the skills and aptitudes to be able to succeed in their careers. That's what DEI is about. Being given the opportunity, given you have the skills. It's been turned into this misnomer that people with no merit are going ahead and taking up all of these positions and careers. So that it's very distressing right now. I think that we need to keep our eyes on the prize. And understanding, as we can see everything falling apart, that a lot of organizations were quite performative, doing things to check a box at the end of the day, because it was the hot topic back in 2020. So we can see how everything is very rapidly falling apart, that these organizations and the folks behind them really did not have the best interests at heart. And we can see this happening. I think the key is to ensure that we remember why we're doing these things. Remember that it was basically to give people the opportunities, people with the skills and abilities, the opportunities to compete on a fair method of competition. So that is what we have to keep on remembering as we evolve and tweak the DEI initiatives in organizations. We just need to keep that North Star, as you said, and it's really important that I'm proud to say that at least Dentons Canada, we're keeping our North Star. It's really important to us. We continue with all of our employee affinity groups and doing the work that we need to do to make this a fairer world. So I think it's really educating people, and you hit on it, not falling prey to the noise that we're hearing right now.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that like a very small few that maybe take something off course
Exactly.
in the name of can then have the entire kind of cause get derailed. Because I think the idea that, if I'm understanding correctly, getting people to the same starting point and then let them have a fair race to the
Have a
finish
fair
line.
race. Nobody's saying that you've got to propel someone without the skills for
Yeah.
something. It's never been about that. But
And I think
it's being
people jump
twisted.
to assume
Yeah,
that that's not it, because the word equity is kind of hard to understand. Like you got to go like double click. So maybe even like what we call DEI can be not truly understood, and people just assume it's
that's right.
quotas
It's
and getting
quotas.
people that aren't qualified for the
Qualified,
jobs.
and which is
Go,
never the case, right?
right.
And
So I think starting line, and maybe there's better ways to communicate it so that everyone understands that. And then we talked about this one once. I think my personal experience as a Jewish person after October 7th with a lot of family in Israel. I was really distraught when I saw a group like Black Lives Matter, chapters of, posting things like the paragliders, who committed such terrible acts immediately after October 7th. And it's like, what a shame, because a group that is standing behind a cause, and even their name just implies something that is truly, again, a North Star. But then my association with that group becomes challenged, and others, and I'm assuming in their own ways, different people that have felt that's not what you're supposed to do or aligned with what you're saying you're doing, and then you start to kind of just question the whole thing. Or when Harvard and Penn and those universities were standing there and testifying and not able to clearly say that for one group it was you're just as concerning as for others, and I felt personally excluded and offended. And so again, I like to think that I'm able to step back and say, again, a few that may have done something does not taint the purpose here of what we're trying to do. But I really appreciate, just having conversations where we can say, what are we trying to accomplish? And then it's like, well, that just makes sense. And I think if you have more of those conversations, it's obvious. And then diversity is just smart business. And so a lot of people make those arguments.
It's smart business at the end of the day. And I think that it's exactly, we can talk about the media and what the media decides to publish or publicize versus what they don't. So there's so many factors in there. I think you hit the nail on the head, the North Star. What are we trying to accomplish here? We're trying to accomplish what is happening on the screen right now. A Black woman and a Jewish man having a conversation about finance, about CFO role, about professionalism. This is what we're trying to accomplish in the world. Nothing more, that we can have, as peers, a great conversation.
And the media will not, because it doesn't sell, pick up on the success stories. And I think that's the sad part, that all of the good that comes out of all of these efforts, it's just not sensational.
For sure.
And so that's, I guess, a challenge that will continue, and I know you'll continue to fight for.
Definitely.
I'm mindful of time. I had like 20 more things I wanted to ask you, but maybe just in the last couple of minutes here, a little bit about sort of the evolution of the CFO role, and how you see it today, and where you see it going. Obviously, you've technology transformation. AI is a buzzword. I don't
That's
know how
right.
much that really comes up in your day to day,
That's
but
right.
maybe talk a little bit about where you see the evolution.
Yes, I definitely think that the CFO role will continue. You will always need someone who's thinking about things. AI and the technology will get better and better. Look at our iPhone, how it used to look. How many years ago when cell phones came in, and look at where it is now. So the technology will continue to get stronger, will continue to get better, will continue to remove manual functions. What we will continue to need is people who are thinking strategically about the business and strategically in terms of how technology will help us. I think that's the number one piece. We will secondly continue to be forward looking. How can technology help us become more forward looking, become more predictive, help us with our teams so we can focus on the areas that are value add. So CFOs, I don't think will ever go away. We are strategic business partners. We sit next to the CEO. I think that won't go away. But I think the way we work and the way we rely on data and use technology will continue to evolve. And if we can't get stuck in with our head in the sand, we need to keep abreast of what's happening accordingly.
Okay, and lastly, a question I like to ask guests is looking back. If you had the opportunity to give yourself advice personally and professionally, what would you tell yourself?
I'd really say trust in yourself, trust in your judgment, be a little less unsure. I think that would be number one. And then number two, I think we touched on, look at the value of networking. It's not always all about the technical piece and being good at, your job per se. Just make sure that you're creating that network to support you, mentors, sponsors, peers, and work really hard on that as if it's part of your job. But part of your job is to network. It goes along with getting your tasks done as well. That's, I think, what I would tell myself and what I tell my daughter.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for taking the time. I hope you'll do it again. And
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it and enjoyed.